Broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studio, it's time for Family Business Radio. Showcasing outstanding family businesses and the advisors who assist them.
Good afternoon. You're listening to another episode of Family Business Radio, hosted by yours truly, Anthony Chen. Today we have three great guests coming to us. We have Greg Lewis from Tennessee Center for Family Business, Monte McDowell from ARCpoint Labs of Atlanta, and Erica Dumpel from CDA Inc. To kind of start off the show. Greg, welcome to the show, Greg.
Hey, it's great to be here from Nashville, Tennessee.
Great. So kind of share with us a story as to what got you started or inspired you to open Tennessee Center for Family Business.
Well, it really starts with my own personal story. Back in 1975, I returned to my hometown to join our family business. I brought with me my new wife and the first of our three daughters to join the family business. I had worked summers and weekends with my dad in our family business. And, we came back to join the family business with all the hopes and dreams of being in business with my family. And, it's sort of like I could tell people, it's like a great adventure. It's something that's happening. It's new, and it's where I'm going to spend my life working with people. But I really found out after a while I say it's sort of like the Prince Charles syndrome. Both the Queen and my father had good intentions of transitioning it to their sons, but it wasn't a matter of how, but it was just a matter of when. And so all we knew was that someday it'll all be ours, but we really realized it was not going to be ours until they were no longer there. So after 17 years of working with my dad and growing our business and everything else, and not having any ownership in it, and not knowing when someday it'll all be mine, I ended up leaving the family business and it continues there. So today I've really been using the experiences that I have working with family businesses and realizing that I'm not the only one. Matter of fact, the Small Business Administration says that in the next 5 years, 40% of privately owned businesses will be transitioning, but only 30% of them will be successful to the second generation and less than 4% to the third generation and beyond. And so working with those family businesses who realize that planning is an important part of that, we've really spent our time working one-on-one, not only with the now gens, but also with the next gens, to create a plan in which creates an opportunity for each part of the family, not only the parents, but also the children, to be able to be successful and to enjoy that. And, around Christmas is really a time when we really get a lot of calls. We find that families are they want family harmony, and especially mom when Christmas and Thanksgiving come around, because they want them to just enjoy each other. They're looking for a shared vision for the family and for the business, and many times the dad doesn't really know what that is. And also they want to implement a transition plan in the business that's sustainable and also is good for everybody, of course. So fortunately, families really struggle with this, and they say, why does it have to be so darn difficult? And that's when they give Tennessee Center for Family Business and other family business advisors around the country a call to say, I need help.
Well, it sounds like you've definitely gone through, as you say, a journey yourself. You've been on the other side and also deep in it in terms of doing succession planning. Can you share some insights as to what keeps family business owners from discussing succession or transition planning with their families, and what steps can they do to at least start the conversation?
Oh, wow. We do day-long seminars on this, but I think a few things there is, one is just plain fear. And that's probably the biggest one. Is probably the founder is the one who started the business, had the vision, It's what they've done their entire life, and they really fear is they don't know what is going to happen when they transition their business. And the fear of the unknown is always something is part of that. Another one is that they have a certain lifestyle that they've become accustomed to, and the business may be the engine that's driving that, and they really are not making plans to cultivate that wealth that they have in their business and transition it into some type of wealth for that. Another one is that they have multiple children. Some of the children are in the business, some of the children are not in the business, and they want to treat everybody equally. And we know that when we treat everybody equally, that's when conflict happens. So we work with them to begin to understand what fairly looks like when it comes to transition planning.
Mm-hmm. So, other than just transition planning of passing the keys on down to the next generation, what other factors or contingency plans should the family business owner or the founders take into account?
Well, contingency planning is one of those things that we really start talking to them about. It's not about death, but it's just about disability or, who does your wife call the next day if you should not wake up that night? And I should say wife or your spouse, because it could be the husband. Who do you call about your finances? Who do you call as far as legal advice? Do you have the wills in place to have that? Do you have the insurance in place for those things? I know in partnerships, complete conflict comes, especially in the contingency plan, is what would it look like if you woke up the next morning and your partner was not your partner, but it was your partner's wife, who might not have know anything about the company and could cause some conflicts there.
Well, that kind of brings another thing into mind is, regarding to succession or transition planning, how does one develop a kind of a dividend policy to kind of keep happiness in the family? Because you brought a little bit on that in terms of trying to, quote unquote, treat all the kids equally.
Yeah. Well, I think the key that you talked about there is having a dividend policy. I talk to many families, members who own stock in their family business, and most of the time in those early conversations, it's been gifted to it. But what would you think if you own 10% of a company, your family business, and you work in it and you get a salary or whatever for it, but you never receive any kind of a dividend distribution? Or even worse, what if you were a child who doesn't work in the family business and you own 3, 4, 5, 10% stock in a family business that you never receive any kind of a dividend from it? So we began to start talking to them about there is income that comes from working in the business, the benefits, the retirement funds, all those kinds of things, but then having a dividend at the end of the year based on the profits of the work, based on your stock ownership, really starts creating a lot of great conversations at Christmas time when there's usually been a distribution just before, or they know that one's coming right after based on their hard work for the entire year and their ownership in the company.
Well, speaking of that, in terms of gifting the business, here's a controversial question: should the family business be gifted or sold to the next generation?
That's good. That's a great question, and we firmly believe that there's many options to that. Sure, there are gifting opportunities for you to do that, and certainly you need to get your tax advice on what portions that you can gift. But we truly believe that buying the company by the next generation should be a part of any transition planning part of that. Now, it doesn't mean that your children or nieces and nephews have to come up with a pile of cash to pay you right then, but there are ways that out of future profits, future earnings that the company makes over 10 years, that the children can begin to pay their parents for what they owe, and then also the parents are receiving some type of income from their business rather than the salary that they might have earned from it when they were working in the business.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of moving pieces and puzzles here. It's not just writing a contract and then kind of throwing the keys across the table and here you go. One thing that kind of jumps out to me is being able to communicate not just between the parents and the kids, but other advisors. I mean, well, the question here is, I imagine everyone's going to have their own opinions. How do you manage conflict in that regard?
Well, the biggest way to manage conflict is to begin communications. Most of the time when I go into a new client family business and start talking to them is finding out what is the underlying issues. And I always tell people there's 3 underlying issues. The first one is communications. The second one is communications. And the third one is communications. People just aren't talking. And so begin that communication process of actually talking with the children, with other family members about what their plans are and what they want to do. There's one thing that we all know is that we can guarantee is that none of us are going to live forever. So begin talking about what it would look like when you eventually have to give up the business. Now, my father, I left the business after 17 years because we had no transition plan. And 10 years later, he ended up closing the family business because at 85 years old, because he didn't have a succession plan, and ended up, unfortunately, having to file bankruptcy.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's kind of a lesson for other business owners who just kind of waited too long or not wanting to have that tough conversation or communicate their desires of having some kind of transition plan, which kind of leads to the next question is, with this sensitive topic, communicating not just in the family, but what about employees that are not involved but are part of the family business? How should they be informed, or should they be informed?
Oh, you most definitely you need to be informed. It goes back to that contingency plan as well. If they are aware of, not only are you providing for the needs of your personal family, but you're also have the family of all of your employees who are helping you to build the success of your business, the profitability, and the dividends and distributions that you have. And so your employees, especially your key employees, they want to know when you are gone, who is going to be their boss, who are they going to report to, and then they are much more likely to stay involved in the business and engaged if they know what the plans of the family are. So we really highly recommend that you begin having that conversation with your key team members earliest as possible as you begin the transition process.
Well, it sounds like you've gone through quite a journey, as you've shared, and also thank you for kind of opening up your personal experience. So for our audience and listeners, kind of on the other side thinking, oh, I never even considered that. What's kind of a big advice you would like to leave for our audience in terms of, at least now the holidays coming in, how to engage or even start that hard conversation at the table?
Well, we've done some podcasts and blogs about the topic. We recommend that at the Christmas dinner table coming up in about a week is that you don't talk about business. Talk about like we will be talking about my new grandson, and talking about hopes and dreams from him, and talking about our children and talking about my parents who passed away last year, and just talking about family and about business and about hopes and dreams for the future, and park the business part and just enjoy that. I promise you that the mother, the head of the household, will be much happier if there's not talking about it. I remember working with a family in Kentucky a few years ago that the mother said, my children stood on the front porch of our house and argued all day on Christmas Day about who was going to get what, why one person was getting more than another. And she said, Greg, I do not want to have another Christmas like that.
Well, certainly wise words. Well, for our listeners, how can they best reach out to you and garner more of your wisdom?
Well, there's several ways. One is you can go to our website, www.tncfb.com. Secondly, you can listen to our podcast, Family Business Today. It's on iTunes and Spotify and any of your platforms for that. Or you can send us an email at info@tncfb.com and get a copy of our free Family Business Transition Assessment, which is simply 25 questions that you can answer. You get the response back automatically, and gives you at least a place to have something to start talking to your partner, your spouse, to your children about the transition process.
Well, thank you, Greg.
You're quite welcome. Thanks for the invitation.
Great. Next up on our guest, we have Erica Dumpel with CDA. Welcome to the show, Erica.
Hi, thank you for inviting me.
Okay. Well, kind of share with us your story as to how you got started and what motivated you.
Well, it was the same year, 1975. I came out of graduate school and there were no jobs. So went into the health insurance industry and quickly discovered that there were no affordable options back then. Fast forward 46 years, it's no different now. So we are also a family business, interestingly. I've had this since 75. My son joined me 13 years ago. So everything that the prior speaker said really is close to my heart.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, can you share with us, as you're kind of going through this journey here, how did you have that conversation with your son, JJ, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Was it something that he was always interested in, or?
Oh, no. Oh, no. The office was at the house for 30 years. Mm-hmm. We had a massive room that we had 6 employees in. Mm-hmm. And the kids from a very young age were filing, answering phones, taking messages if they happened to be home, and in the summer doing more. And he came out of undergrad with a degree and kind of looked at me, and I said, well, we need an extra set of hands. So he jumped right in, and he started at the bottom with all the grunt work, and now he has almost single-handedly handled the Medicare open enrollment and the individual open enrollment, which closes tomorrow. So it's been nights and weekends, and it's been a tough time for him, but it's a real eye-opener for what it is to run a family business.
Certainly, I can only imagine. So as we're kind of digging right, as you say, we're closing the window, like you mentioned, tomorrow.
Yes.
Open enrollment, a little stressful time. So thank you for taking the time today. So can I share with you, what happens if someone, let's say, misses that window?
That's a problem. We have opportunities this year, thank goodness, to go through January 15th for a February 1 start date. So for the first time in years, there is that window. But if you miss that, unless you have a qualifying event, which is a loss of coverage, it is very hard to get Affordable Care Act compliant policies. The advantage this year is that the subsidies have gotten so large that I think it's caught people's attention. And a lot of folks are still checking in at the last minute saying, should I be talking to you? Yes, you should. Where in the past people could not afford coverage, either the premium or the cost to use in terms of copays and deductibles, the landscape has changed even more so with the COVID. The legislation there has been very positive for the consumer. So we've got some really nice opportunities for people. Plus, some of the smaller groups, now we are able to look at subsidized coverage for employees by dismantling the group plan, getting the employer out of the whole compliance set of issues and the expectation set of issues. What I've said for years is if I do my job right for a group, everybody's miserable because someone doesn't have their doctors. Somebody else doesn't like the plan design. It's too rich. It's too lean. So this way everybody can pick what they want. The employer is hands off. They can use that, whatever money they had been using, for something else. Mm-hmm. You know, there are other benefits in the whole benefit realm that people would really like. Mm-hmm. So if we can get them, if they get the employer out of the subsidy portion, which is now the government is stepping in, by all means, for the time being, let's do that. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's definitely, as you say, certain things don't change all the way back in the 70s in terms of the cost of healthcare, and premiums are not like they're going down. If anything, they're going up. How can employers kind of navigate around that? Is it even possible to control those costs?
There's a lot going on. For employers who are healthy or who have employees who are healthy, there are medically underwritten plans. We can cut 20 to 25% off premium. If groups are wise in how they use their claims dollars and have money left at the end in those contracts, some or all of that money comes back to them. So there's a motivator to pay attention to going to a freestanding outpatient surgical center instead of a hospital-owned surgical center. You know, you start cutting bills in half. You start paying attention to where you get your lab work, where you have your MRIs done. We all need to roll up our sleeves. And in fact, for next year, we have a big program coming out of my company to just start reaching out to all of the employees of our firms and educating.
So it sounds like as if the employer are incentivized to try to get their employees to be more healthier, take more active control of their lifestyle, which from sounds of it, they would open up a window for them to reduce their premiums.
Absolutely. And it's something that needs to be shopped every year. Mm-hmm. I am amazed at the number of people who just accept the renewal. Well, this year the renewals are 39, 49%. You cannot take that lying down. That's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And even if a group has to renew into January or February, you can change your plan anytime during the year. This is not a problem. We can dismantle a group plan. We can create a group plan. We can go through medical underwriting, whatever needs to be done. But employers need to find a real partner in this. Trying to do it themselves is just impossible.
So what you're saying is that the employer should not be trying to fly a Boeing jet.
No.
With just the instruction guide and that's it.
No. It is way too expensive.
Right. Well, then kind of you touch a little bit also on the Medicare side. So there's a lot of myths out there. So kind of explain to our listeners, like, how does one know whether they quote unquote qualify or when they should enroll?
Okay. So here comes the most complex part right now of the health insurance world. When an employee or when an individual reaches age 65, he or she, as long as they have met their 40 quarters of qualified work, qualify for Medicare enrollment. If an individual is disabled under age 65 and either has Lou Gehrig's disease, or ALS, that person instantly qualifies. Or if it's a rather disability after 24 Social Security disability payments, they qualify. So then the question comes, should we enroll? Should we not enroll? So if someone works for a very large company, and not that large, 20 or more employees, they don't need to be enrolling in all of this stuff. And the feeling that, well, we just want to make sure that the government knows we're here. Trust me, they know you're here. They know all about you. So the need to enroll just isn't really there. In reverse, under 20 employees, age 65, you better have your A and B in place because the carrier reserves the right to not cover the claims that Medicare would otherwise be responsible for. Mm-hmm. And that's the lion's share. So it's a little bit complex there. And then, of course, you've got the conversation, Medicare supplement, Medicare Advantage, Medicare drug card. It has become very overwhelming. And someone yesterday said to me very nicely, I find it very unforgiving. I thought that's the nicest I've heard anyone describe the system. I think unforgiving is very kind. It's a lot worse than that.
Yes. So can you then share with those who are kind of scratching their head and thinking, all right, well, this is almost like an alphabet soup of options.
Yes.
Running through the whole gamut. How does one navigate as to being able to understand which option is best for them?
Again, you need to partner with somebody. On the Medicare.gov website, there are 2 big handbooks, Medicare, My Medicare Benefits and Medicare and You. If you're going to do it yourself, start there. Start a year ahead of time. Read everything you can. Talk to everybody you can. If you're going to be a do-it-yourselfer, it takes a year to make sure that you're making good decisions. I feel badly when people just make a decision based on what their friend, their family member, their neighbor did. Not everybody wears a size 6 red sneaker, and that's the expectation there. It just does not always work out well.
Certainly. Well, then there's also kind of a hubbub in the political sphere of legislation potentially looking to control the reimbursement on hospitals and other providers. I mean, what impact will this have not just in the healthcare but also the health insurance industry as well?
Well, I'm more focused on the consumer than anyone else. You start cutting back on reimbursements, you immediately have a reduction in opportunity for access. The dominoes start to fall. If an individual cannot access a doctor or a provider of some sort, he or she will not get the services they need, which then becomes a domino of a little nothing becomes a big something. We recently picked up a new client who was unable to afford health insurance, has severe diabetes, was not able to get to the doctor with the COVID, had an abscess that was not treated, and lost a piece of her foot in a surgery. So that is the most extreme that I have seen this year, but that is not uncommon. The costs of insulin, as an example, are just outrageous. The cost of some of these, call it preventive medications that preventing serious conditions, are incredibly expensive. So when there is a cutback, it impacts on what people do, which ultimately ends up with a lot more emergency room use, which is more expensive than regular hospital use. And a lot of it could have been avoided with traditional doctor care and compliance to whatever medical treatments should have been done or medical behavior the individual should have practiced. So, yeah, the cutbacks have been postponed, thank goodness, for the spring, but they are on the horizon.
Well, when you say postponed, it sounds like just kind of kicking the can down the road.
Yes, they are.
Is there any chance of this actually going through, or is it just running in the background?
Oh, it will go through at some point. The system is very expensive. We all kind of laugh if we could just get the $60 billion of Medicare fraud out of the system. I've got to believe there's $60 billion of under 65er fraud. If we could just get that out, that would be a great start. But there are not enough pennies in the dollar. So something will have to be done. How they do it and over what period of time, I would not want to be a legislator right now.
It sounds like there's between a rock and a hard place there.
Absolutely.
So for those who don't want to read a too large phone book size instruction manual for Medicare and try to learn how to pilot a Boeing by themselves, like here you go, how can they best find you and get some guidance?
Best bet is our website, which is cdainc.net. I can be reached at Erica, ERICA, at cdainc.net. And our phone number is 770-449-7369. We are a party of 6. We are very accessible. We do an awful lot of consulting. We do an awful lot of just regular conversations to steer people in the right direction. And 46 years of doing this, I've got a little hint of which direction things may be going. And based on people's medical history and their medical conditions, there are different recommendations that come up.
Well, thank you, Erica.
Thank you.
Our next guest, Monte McDowell with ARCpoint Labs of Atlanta. Welcome to the show, Monte.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Anthony.
So kind of share with us your origin story as to what got you to start the business, what motivated you.
Yeah. So ARCpoint Labs of Atlanta-Northeast is a franchise. And I started off, not unlike a lot of people who come from corporate America, sitting on their back deck, during the pandemic, stuck in the house, trying to figure out what their next move is going to be. That's who I was, right? So I had some entrepreneurial thoughts over the years and never really pulled the trigger, but started to look at some franchise opportunities. And ARCpoint spoke to me just because of my background in human resources, been in HR now for 28 years. And the clinical side of the business is something that my wife, Lorraine, who's a nurse practitioner, would be able to, contribute to as well. So it was really born out of, wanting to do something different, but also from a family legacy perspective. So as you and I have talked in the past about family businesses and small businesses, that was important for me, is to share with my kids that you can actually do something different and actually build a business of your own at some point. I tell people all the time that I really didn't have those kind of examples growing up. I was surrounded by people who did a lot of great work and, worked really hard. My parents worked really hard for the state and for the university where we're from, but not a lot of business owners around me. So I really wanted to show my kids that there's another option, so that's really where it came from.
So as you were, I imagine, exploring franchises, what kind of jumped out at you? You mentioned a little bit about the background, going to medical and your wife being involved. Mm-hmm. Was that your first choice, or was it just kind of a happenstance as you were exploring?
Yeah, kind of funny story, right? So, my wife would tell you if she was sitting here that I've had different thoughts of different franchises to buy into over the years, whether it be a quick service restaurant, burger joint, or it could have been a fitness enterprise or whatever the case might be. Obviously, those two things are not really related. They work against each other. But, none of those, kind of business ideas or franchises I had any background in, right? So it didn't make a lot of sense for us. Being in HR, the drug and alcohol pre-employment drug screening is something that I've had to deal with my entire career. So I'm very familiar with that. The clinical side is where my wife shines, right? So she's a nurse practitioner, has been in healthcare for the better part of 10, 15 years now. So I knew that we could probably do something together, which was exciting for us.
Great. So kind of share with us, what is ARCpoint Labs and where did the clinical part come in for our listeners who are just finding out what this is?
Absolutely. So ARCpoint Labs is a franchise, as I mentioned, but we're a business that serves businesses to keep their work sites safe, but we also serve individual consumers, right, to make sure that they stay healthy. So on the business side, you think about pre-employment drug screening, as well as other wellness products that we have and services that we have for businesses. COVID is obviously the hot topic these days. The emergency temporary standard for vaccines is something that we are involved in, right? So it's obviously tied up in the courts at the moment. But when businesses are ready to test all of their employees on a weekly basis and provide vaccines, we can provide that service. That keeps their work site safe, right? On the individual side and the clinical side, it's really about anything, we basically offer 10,000 plus types of clinical lab tests, right? So anything from COVID testing for travel, it could be DNA testing, so we actually service attorneys, the legal field. So legal DNA testing, as well as informational DNA testing, as well as fun things like early gender reveal testing, right? So, we'll have people come into us as early as 8 weeks of pregnancy, wanting to know the sex of their baby. So we can do that kind of work as well. So again, anything that you would typically go to any outside lab for, you can come to us for. So we're a great resource for folks who are either don't have insurance or have high deductible plans and they're looking for a lab to get their blood work done. They can come to us for that as well.
So on the business side, who are, as you mentioned, kind of the drug and alcohol testing, do you find additional standards? Because you scratch a little bit on the COVID side as well, and also for travelers. Are you seeing kind of a spike in demand in that regard from the business side?
For COVID testing or for other things?
The COVID test, both for the business and also potential travelers. Because if I remember correctly, just not too long ago, went from 3 days recent test now to 1 day.
Yes. That creates a huge problem for travelers because they typically call us because they're looking for options. They don't know where to turn. A lot of the research is on them to find out, if they're traveling to a particular country, what's the requirement? Which type of a test? What's the travel? What's the time frame that you have to get your test done? Things of that nature. So they have to do some of that work, but we do a lot of things in terms of consulting with people to let them know what we do and what we provide. Because some people don't know the difference between an antigen and a PCR test, and which one is required for travel and which one is just required to maybe return to work, for example. So yeah, we do a lot of just really educating people in terms of the types of tests that they may need. But for businesses, yeah, it's truly a consulting game. We don't really do a whole lot of hard sales, knocking on doors to say, do you want this product or the service? It's really about, what are you doing for the mandate? How are you preparing yourself? We may, help them come up with an option that doesn't involve us at all. Right. As an HR person, I know what it's like to sit in that seat where somebody says, here's the problem. Now go figure out how to come up with a solution. So that's what we try to do, is just to help, business leaders and HR folks come up with the right solutions for their employee teams.
It sounds like you're coming in, as you mentioned, your background in HR. You've been on the other side, so you know exactly
that's right.
What is it that they're going through.
That's right.
So other than kind of the elephant in the room, what other things they should be taking into account for going to 2022?
Really, it's about, again, employees now, I think the term that's being used is the great resignation, right? So employees are now, like me, trying to figure out what the next stage is for themselves. And they may decide to stay with their company, switch companies, or do something on their own. So it really behooves a lot of HR folks and business leaders to figure out what their employee teams really need, what their associates need in terms of safety, a safe environment, a safe culture, things of that nature. So drug and alcohol has a lot to do with that, right? In terms of making sure that, from a pre-employment, post-accident, random testing, that they're keeping drugs out of their work environment, especially certain work environments, manufacturing, distribution, folks who are driving forklifts, driving on the road, things of that nature. So yeah, 2022 is going to be really about making sure that you have the right culture in your environment, and as well as the right infrastructure to make sure that you're keeping your workplace safe, because it's important to everyone.
Great. So that's, now that we kind of scratch just on the surface on the business side. Now on the consumer side, you touch a little bit on the healthcare and those who can just take any form of testing from finding out 8 weeks into the gender or gender reveal. What other services in regarding to the health? Can you give us a couple of examples for our listeners?
Yeah. So nutrition testing. So people sometimes need to know what foods affect them. Right. So we have tests that measure someone's, the impact of certain foods on their health and on their bodies. We also do things like, I mentioned DNA already, but we actually had an inquiry the other day, which is an interesting story. Someone came to us and said, it was a woman whose mother-in-law passed away very early in life from breast cancer. And there's a test called BRCA that tests for the mutated cancer gene. So she has 2 adult children, young ladies, and she wanted to make sure, she wanted to test them to see if they carry this gene, right? So that's not something that's typically covered by insurance. So they called us to find out, hey, do you guys offer this test? Now, as I mentioned, we have 10,000 tests that we have access through our reference labs that we partner with. So there's no real way to have all of this and have my team memorize all 10,000 of these tests and how much they cost and things of that nature. So we just did a little research for her, and lo and behold, we do offer that test. It's a very expensive test. But that individual that reached out to us had no other lab in the area that she could find that could offer that test. So it's really about just making sure that people know that there's a lab in the area that if you call to say, hey, this is what I've been thinking about doing, do you have access to it, or do you know where we can go to get it? Mm-hmm. So
it sounds like it's not just for traditional, because when you talk about healthcare, clinical blood tests, I'm just thinking in terms of cholesterol. It sounds like you even go down to the nitty-gritty details of potential genetic inherited diseases.
Right.
They just question mark
Absolutely.
at the back of their head.
Absolutely. So you mentioned cholesterol. So that would be like a basic test that somebody could come to us for. Very inexpensive, but people tend to want to get that checked on a very regular basis, right? We have a men's wellness panel, a women's wellness panel. We test for all sexually transmitted diseases, all those kinds of things that we can do. And, it actually makes for a very interesting work environment for our team, because they're not doing the same things, every single day, all day. So our typical day might look like somebody coming in for a pre-employment drug screen for a company that they've applied for. The next person that came in is traveling to Bermuda and it needs a PCR test because they're traveling tomorrow. The next person that will come in may need a vaccine, right? And the person in the afternoon may need a more detailed test, for other blood work, so it becomes a very interesting place to be from that perspective. By far the most fun, though, is somebody who's coming in to find out the sex of their baby, because they're planning a gender reveal party, right? So, so that becomes a fun thing, as opposed to a very serious matter where they're looking for a job or looking to see if they have a particular disease or something of that nature. So, so it makes for a very fun experience.
So then for our listeners who are parents to be or grandparents who've been not so subtly nudging the kids about having grandkids, how soon or in terms of how many weeks in should the parents or the mother wait until they can feel confident to come to you and then take that test?
Yeah, I mean, this doesn't really take the place of an ultrasound that you might normally get, throughout someone's pregnancy. But 8 weeks is the minimum. But we'll have people who, like I said, it's more of it's not a medical necessity. It's really more of, I'm curious in terms of, is it a boy or a girl, right? And some of it is about planning too, because they may want to plan their nursery or something of that nature. But the far majority of the folks that we've seen for that purpose, they're planning a party, and they just want to know, which kind of, is it pink smoke or blue smoke that's going to come out of whatever cannon that they're planning to fire off, right? So, it becomes a fun conversation.
Right. So then, since we're kind of touching a little bit on the health side, and you touch a little bit on the cholesterol and some of the labs, we know there's kind of a growing industry of online. We can just order some kind of lab online, and someone kind of comes and takes the blood test, and they're concerned about their health and want to be more proactive towards it.
Yeah.
How does ARCpoint Labs kind of make themselves, unique compared to all these kind of cookie cutter where we're just going to test all these things that some people have never even heard of?
Yeah, I think to your point, Anthony, there are people who will find a reference lab online. So they may be located in Florida, California, or whatever. And those companies will actually send them a prearranged kit, but they need to find a lab just to do the blood draw. So we serve that purpose. Okay. Right. But in other cases, someone will call us directly and want to know if we perform that test. So we can actually order that test for them. No doctor, prescription is required or anything of that nature. We don't accept insurance, so we're a self-pay organization. So it's, we're easy to do business that way, from that perspective. So, I think we offer, what I think differentiates us is, the fact that we're mobile. So we have a lab in Duluth, but we're also able to do some things in a mobile fashion. So we're not doing blood work today in a mobile way, but we can. Mobile phlebotomy is a thing. But we do COVID testing in a concierge way. So we work with a lot of individuals in the film and entertainment industry, as well as other folks who just, it's convenient for us to come to their home or to their workplace, to do testing. And we have businesses that will reach out to us as well, because they have a lot of international travelers, executives that were, coming in and out of the U.S., and they'll need us to come to their work location and test them. So I think that makes us unique, as well as the fact that we're able to, we try not to say no.
So then for those who are kind of looking online in terms of getting proactive with their health markers, would you be able to kind of give them guidance as to what tests are applicable or not applicable? Or would they have to come to you with something that this is exactly what I'm looking for?
Yeah. We try to educate where we can. That's where my wife comes into play, and our team, because they have experience, in healthcare, to be able to say, here's what I've seen done before. Right. But generally speaking, people will call us when they already know which kind of test they want. And they're just looking for a lab to get it done for them.
Right. So if you're a listener and you're a business owner or someone who just wants to be proactive on health, or you just got to notice that, you need a PCR test and you're flying out tomorrow, how best can our listeners reach out to you? Yeah.
So, my email address is m.mcdowell@arcpointlabs.com. Our website is www.arcpointlabs.com/Atlanta-Northeast. And we are located on Facebook and Instagram.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All right. So you hear it here. It sounds like, from today's theme, a lot revolves around communication, along with having that desire or making their vision very clear as to what that is, whether it's having a vision in terms of creating a legacy to the next generation, or having that hard conversation of creating some kind of business transition plan. to bring our three wonderful guests coming back, one question I would like to ask is in terms of the theme of creating a legacy and having that component of communicating. If you can wind back the hands of time back to when you started the business, what would be the one major advice you would give to yourself that you feel you would have been much better served to create the legacy that you want to create going forward to the next generation? So again, the question is, if you can wind back the hands of time, the theme of communicating to yourself, your younger self, what would be the advice you would give back? So that's the question. So today, this show is sponsored and brought to you by yours truly, Anthony Chen, with Lighthouse Financial Network, securities and advisory services offered through Royal Alliance Associates, Inc., RAA, member FINRA SIPC. RAA is separately owned, and other entities and or marketing names, products, or services referenced here are independent of RAA. Our main office address is at 575 Broad Hollow Road in Melville, New York, 11747. You can best reach me at 631-465-9090. Extension is 5075, or my email, which is just my full name, Anthony Chen, CHEN @lfnllc.com. Now, to kind of bring our guests back, the question again is if we can wind back the hands of time with the theme of communicating and legacy, what would be the one advice you would give back to your younger self? Greg?
I think that when you first started, very entrepreneurial, type A personality, bull in a china shop when it came to starting companies and building companies. But having learned that profits are the applause you receive from serving your clients and serving your employees well, spoken by my friend Ken Blanchard, that being humble is not a bad thing to be when you're in business, and you don't always have to have all the answers, but be humble enough to ask professionals and experts for help when you're into a thing. And so from an epithet, on my, I would suppose it would be as he was a good and faithful servant.
Great. Thank you, Greg. Erica?
That's a tough one. I think, if anything, I would say to young women who are starting their own businesses to dig deep for courage. We can do a lot more than we believe we can. I don't know how many years I lost just working and not really seeing this as a business, just seeing it as a practice. There is a difference. We create businesses that are saleable, as now discovered with my next gen coming in, that it is very saleable, that it can be a generational transfer. I think especially back in the mid-'70s, we were just happy that we were able to do what we wanted to do. But for the next generation coming through, take it seriously, partner up with other people who are trying to accomplish what you are trying to accomplish. There are a lot of networking opportunities. You're going to find different people, different industries, different personalities. Figure out how to work and how to help each other, because partnership is really the answer in at least the Atlanta market.
Thank you. All right. Monte?
Yeah, I struggled with this question as well. So I came up with a couple of different things. First is to trust yourself. Starting this business after being in corporate America for 28 years, I learned a lot of things over the years, right? And all of those things have really served me well in a very short period of time. But there were times when I just didn't trust myself, didn't trust my judgment. And I think it hindered me a little bit just starting out. So I think just trusting yourself and listening to that inner voice, for me, that's a spiritual thing. God speaks to me in a lot of different ways, as he does for a lot of us. And just being able to trust that voice and move forward and know that you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. I think the second thing is patience. As a new business owner, you feel like you may have the right business model and everything looks great. It's a shiny new toy that you're playing with, and it should be successful day one. right? But you have to have patience to know that if you are doing the right things, you have the right irons in the fire, that the success will come, but you've got to continue to work for it.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So for this section, this would be Anthony's take in the financial world based on today's conversation and topic of communicating and legacy. So sometimes I get asked a question from clients or prospect as to when is the best time to start? How do I even engage this tough conversation with my spouse? My quick answer would be start with a question of why and understanding what it is it's important to them. So sometimes just digging a little deeper beyond just, oh, well, I want to have XYZ for a portfolio. Well, why? Is it for creating a legacy to make sure that the next generation has a slightly better life than what I had today or yesterday? Or is it something that I want to give back to the community because I've been a direct benefactor of some kind of nonprofit that intervened in my life? So when talking about financial planning, it's not always just about the insurance and investments in the world, which is important. But at the end of the day, those are just really the tools to accomplish something. And that is being able to accomplish and succeed in one's legacy. So that's a little bit of my take. It's Anthony Chen with Lighthouse Financial. Thank you for listening to Family Business Radio.